guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is a multifamily and commercial investment expert, David Barker. Now, David is a former economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and partner in Barker Companies, which owns, manages, and develops multifamily apartments as well as other commercial real estate. He also has been an adjunct professor at the University of Iowa and the University of Chicago, teaching real estate investment, urban economics, and corporate finance. Additionally, David has published articles in academic journals, and his research has been covered in publications such as Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Economist. And so with that, guys, it's an honor to welcome David Barker to the show. David, how you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. Excited to, again, pull back the curtain and get a better understanding of you, your business. But, before we go down that rabbit hole, David, what I would love is that I gave you that very brief introduction. Would love if maybe you take a few moments and expand upon it, give us a little bit of a background of yourself, maybe a former life, and then ultimately what led you into the real estate world.
Well, sure. I grew up in Iowa, and it was a family business, actually. My dad was a high school principal here, and my mother encouraged him to read a book on real estate investment, and they did, and started buying some kind of low-end apartments in town. My brother and my wife, who I met in high school, and I all worked in the business while we were in high school, and kind of learned it from then. Then I went off to graduate school, and I actually bought an apartment building while I was in graduate school, lived in it, managed it. Then went off to work for the Federal Reserve. My brother took over the family business. Then my wife and I moved back, and we're all working together on it now. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
So you're kind of born into it then, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how old were you when your father or your parents bought that first property?
That I would have been 14.
Okay. Okay. And then it sounded like the family had their hands in the business. I mean, what was that new perspective like for you at that age? I mean, obviously that was an eye-opening period of time that ultimately turned into a career. And so would love to understand the kind of evolution of that story if we could.
Oh, I think what I learned early on was the independence that you get from investing and from having your own business. I mean, so my dad continued to be a high school principal until I graduated from high school. Then he retired, and from that, and continued with my mom doing apartments. And what a change! A lot more money, a lot more independence, and I think a lot more fun that they had. And so I always kept that in mind, and that's what I would want to do eventually.
Okay. And your former life at the Federal Reserve, tell us about that. How was that experience?
Well, so like I said, I got a PhD in economics at University of Chicago. Loved doing that, and so it was natural to look for research jobs after that. And Federal Reserve seemed interesting. Seemed you had a lot of freedom to do the kind of research that you wanted while helping them on banking issues. Paid well, paid better than any of the other positions that I was looking at. And it was in New York City, which sounded exciting. So I did that, learned a lot, enjoyed it, but realized that I was really not cut out to be, working for someone else for a long time. And there's nothing against that. I mean, it's great. A lot of people have great jobs and love them. It just wasn't right for me. And so my wife and I both decided to come back and give it a try.
So that's when you formed Barker Companies, when you left New
Yes.
York, came back to Iowa. Okay,
Right.
so let's talk about that. What was the initial plan? Has it evolved over time? And then, we can dive a little bit deeper into what you're in today. I know multifamily apartments is one, but we had mentioned, or we talked about before the show, some strip centers as well, retail. And I think you had also mentioned, was it convenience stores or no?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
convenience stores as well.
Yep.
So you've got your hands in a couple different pots there, but let's talk about the founding of Barker Companies and what was the initial plan and what that's looked like over the years.
Yeah. Well, my parents and my brother had already built up a portfolio of apartments in the Iowa City area. So my wife and I decided to look outside of Iowa City, And we found some apartments we looked at them in Minneapolis, Kansas City, Omaha, Cedar Rapids, but finally found property in the Quad Cities in Davenport, Iowa that we liked and that we thought we could negotiate a reasonable price for. That's really sort of always been my approach. Look at a lot of properties, make offers that make sense, be willing to walk away from them and until you find something that makes sense. And so we bought a 300 unit complex in Davenport, Iowa. And it it was a good time. It was the early 90s, and real estate prices were depressed after the savings and loan crisis, after the tax law changes that had happened in the late 80s. And so we felt, but interest rates were coming down. We thought 8% interest rates were amazingly good at that time. And
Yeah.
so we thought it was a good time to buy, and it worked out well. And a lot of the Quad Cities had also had some economic difficulties, and so had recently had very high vacancy rates in apartments. And so there was upside. In other words, we were able to buy properties that had, maybe occupancy in the low 90s, and we were able to push that up to the upper 90s and add a lot of value.
What were some the vacancy issues that you speak of? What were they due to? Is it just poor management?
No, no, it was really the economic environment of that city that a lot of agricultural manufacturing had scaled back after the farm crisis somewhat earlier, and factory closures like a lot of Midwestern cities had seen at that time.
So help me understand the thought process behind you. You identified what you felt was a good opportunity, 300 unit apartment complex. It had some upside and basically increasing the occupancy. That vacancy was a result of the local economic landscape at that point in time. Talk to me about gaining the confidence of, obviously that was your not your family's first investment, not even your first investment, but a 300 unit apartment complex in New York. That's a fairly big endeavor. It's a fairly large
Yeah.
one. Um, Getting comfortable with the business plan and the viability of actually executing on it and be able to increase that occupancy to see that upside potential.
Well, the big problem was getting the confidence of lenders. And so we talked to a few who turned us down. We're not interested in it until we found a lender that believed in us. And that's really what allowed us to get going. I should also say there were some, it wasn't all the environment. We also saw some things that weren't being done as well as they could be at that property. In particular, pricing decisions. We thought that they were kind of sometimes raising rents in the wrong time of the year. Maybe the way that leases were staggered wasn't quite right, and then we could improve things that way also.
Got it. So that was back in the late 90s. Fast forward to today, multifamily has really been the darling child of the real estate world for the last decade, really, and continues to be so. And what are the big differences from the multifamily business and the multifamily space back then to what it is today?
Oh, well, I'd say yes. You're right that there a lot more institutional interest.
Hmm.
A lot of money has flowed in, and so the pricing has gotten more difficult. I have always aimed for properties that are, say, too big for a lot of local investors, but too small for a lot of institutional, either too small or too old or something else that keeps the institutional buyers away. Because otherwise, you're just paying crazy prices,
Yeah.
cap rates, ridiculous cap rates. So we're looking for, those properties that are kind of in between that maybe there's less competition to buy and that we can get a better price for.
Have you seen any pricing adjustments as of the last couple of months, or let's call it last 6 months? Given the changes in the debt world and transactional volume is down. Have you
Yes.
noticed any adjustments on the sell side?
Yes, it's starting. And you're right. The first thing that you see generally when things like this happen is a reduction in volume because it takes a while for sellers to get it through their head that the value of their properties has declined. And that's a hard thing to accept when you could get a 5 cap 6 months ago. Now maybe you can get a 6 or a 6.5. It takes a while for sellers for that to really sink in. And until then, they don't adjust their pricing and deals don't happen.
And so I'm assuming you've still been making offers, but yet maybe are not
Well,
seeing that the adjustment's just not happening fast enough, or it's going to take some more time for seller expectations to come into reality. Is that an accurate
yeah. Oh,
statement?
yeah. I haven't been buying apartments because
Okay.
the price has just been too high. So we have shifted into convenience stores and retail. We see better pricing on. There's a lot of people are uncomfortable with retail, internet competition, how badly it was affected by COVID, things like that. But we see some opportunities there, so that's where we've been.
And so, speaking of retail, we talking about grocery anchored retail, neighborhood, just neighborhood retail, strip centers. What type of
Yes,
retail?
yes, neighborhood strip centers. We have one that is grocery anchored, but others that are not. But you just got to look really carefully at that tenant mix that you've got and be comfortable that these are tenants that
Hmm.
are immune from internet competition and
Yeah.
have kind of made it through some of the difficulties of the last few years.
Have you found any trepidation with lenders at this point in time? Just generally speaking, as it relates to retail, even with these neighborhood retail centers that aren't, I mean, these types of business, most of them are necessities. At least at this point in time in the world, with where we're at with technology. Amazon can't necessarily fulfill getting your nails done or can't give you a haircut yet. Maybe drones will come with scissors and nail polish at some point in our lifetime, but that's not the case today. And so, but even with all that being said, have you found this a general trepidation when going to get debt on these different retail assets from lenders?
You know, it's I'm in a different situation now than I was when I first started. And so lenders now have more confidence in us. And so
Okay,
I think
good point.
that helps.
Hmm.
So if someone was just getting started and trying to make a new lending relationship and buying properties like this, I think they might have some difficulty and lenders would be nervous. And you'd have to probably shop around to several before you found one who was interested.
Hmm. Yeah, no, good point. I wanted to ask you as well about just as far as your holdings. Right now, you've got assets, at least multifamily. You've got assets in Iowa as well as a few select markets in Illinois. Any fear or any perceived risk around a statewide rent control coming into effect in Illinois? I know it's been talks for quite some time now, and Cook County is really the only county that, to my knowledge, that's ever been impacted by any type of rental restriction or rent control. But it seems that it's always been on an agenda, just never made it far enough, never got enough legs. Is that a concern of yours?
It absolutely is a concern. I'm on the research committee of the National Multi-Housing Council, and we talk about this a lot. And
Hmm.
there are it was some rent control was popular many years ago, and then really faded away as people read the economic research showing that it has negative effects. And many states passed statewide bans on rent control so that local governments could not enact them. But over the last, I'd say 5 years, it has been growing around the country. More and more states have loosened that, or local governments have enacted rent controls. And I think it's too bad because it makes housing markets function less efficiently, and that's bad for everyone.
And when these lawmakers are considering implementing rent control, and the research suggests lots and lots, years and years worth of research suggests that it's not the best course of action to take. Help me understand. I mean, you guys talk about this on a regular basis. Help me understand the decision making process of ignoring the research and ultimately going against it and thinking that they're going to get a different outcome. How does that
Oh,
come
it's
about?
it's it's a votes. It's a rational. Unfortunately, it's a rational decision for a lot of politicians because for an existing tenant who's got an apartment and and wants to stay there, rent control can be good for them in the short run. It takes a few years for the building to start to to deteriorate, and
Hmm.
and those people will vote for the politician that puts that rent control into position. But for the long term, for the city, it will have negative effects. I used to live in a rent controlled apartment in New York City. It was a loft, and they had special rules for lofts in Soho. And I sublet it from from someone who had gotten a great deal, but the building was crumbling because there was no incentive for anyone to put any money into it. It was in a cool location and it was fun to live there, but boy, you could sure see that that system just doesn't work.
Yeah. As far as what the future holds for us, no one's got a crystal ball, but obviously we're going through some shaky economic times, and we're really seeing the impacts in the commercial real estate space. You know, again, no one's got a working crystal ball that I know of, but we've all got our general idea of what we feel might play out over the next 12 to 24 months. Would love to get an understanding of kind of seeing it through your lenses, but also just even your colleagues. What is the chatter, both you and your business as well as with your other colleagues, as to what might come about in the commercial real estate space over the next 12 to 24
Yeah.
months, and will it result in opportunities for those that are opportunistic?
Yeah. Well, this might be a little old school, but I like looking at money supply figures,
Hmm.
and those are easy to get. The Federal Reserve has a system called FRED, and if you just Google, Fed, you'll find it, and you can look up. All right, what's M3? What's M2? The measures of the money supply doing, and before inflation took off, you could see these numbers starting to increase dramatically and predict inflation to come, and it sure came. And now, though, the money supply is shrinking faster than it has like ever. Okay,
Hmm.
so that would suggest that we're going to see an end to inflation. We don't know exactly when. The lags in monetary policy are long and variable, as Milton Friedman said. But given that the money supply is actually shrinking now, we probably ought to see inflation moderate, and maybe more than what the Fed had in mind. We may be in an environment in not long. I mean, I'm not saying this will happen. I'm just saying it's a possibility. We may be back in a situation where inflation is below target, and they're trying again to push inflation up. So I think that the key to that means be open to all kinds of possibilities. Be
Hmm.
open to what are your vulnerabilities in
Yeah.
all kinds of situations. But I think there will be opportunities to refinance this high rate debt that a lot of us are putting on right now.
Yeah. Let's talk about just really, you know, our own vulnerability, and what are you doing as a company? I mean, have you made pivotal adjustments with inside the organization, with the the debt that you have on your assets? I mean, paying down some of the leverage. I mean, are there any shifts that you've made over the last year or two, um, just in preparation for what might come?
Sure. Well, we tried to lock. When rates were ridiculously low, we tried to lock some things in for a while, and so we still have the benefit of that. And where we had some lines of credit that were had fixed rates for a while, and so we can use that to do some acquisitions, but can't get can't get that any new debt that way. So it just means that we're looking. It's harder to do acquisitions, really. So we're trying to save up cash for when sellers start really cutting prices, and then maybe we'll see some opportunities.
Have you noticed any shifts at this point in time in the tenants? Let's talk about just the economic impact that it's had on them and their ability to pay rent. Has there been any shifts over the past 6 or so months that you've seen personally in your portfolio?
You know, our our payment rates are still good. Our
Hmm.
occupancy is still strong. I am hearing from some other operators about uh, increases in fraud, in particular,
Hmm.
that they're seeing more tenants who, have stolen identities, come in, live for a while, and then leave, or tenants who just stop paying rent and stay as long as they can. So I believe there's some increase in that, but so far I think the payment rates are holding up reasonably well. And the NMHC publishes a tracker on that, and I haven't looked at that in a little while.
Got it. Got it. And just your business as a whole, David, as far as your structure, I mean, do you typically with the different investments that you make, is it all in-house capital? Do you raise capital from high net worth individuals? Is it a mix of the two?
So we were just ourselves for a long time and didn't operate with any outside partners. But then, over the years, I met some people who had interesting ideas, and we did joint ventures with them. Some projects in the Des Moines area. Had a great partner on that. Had a great partner where we did some things in Little Rock, Arkansas, buying apartments down there. We bought a lot of apartments down there, and then sold them and had a nice gain. We have a project now in the Cleveland area with that same partner. And we've got a group of investors who were interested in the convenience stores that we put together, and so we now manage a commercial portfolio where we have some outside investors, but it's mostly friends, people that I've known
Yeah.
for.
I've always been curious about the convenience store space. Is the gas the loss leader, and most of the money is made on the items sold within the convenience store? Or is it the opposite?
No, it is. Yes, it's the inside sales.
Okay.
Of the gross sale. I mean, a lot of stores, they're not all like this, but a lot of them are like, three-quarters of the gross sales are gas, but three-quarters of the profit is on the inside sale.
Got it.
Right.
Got it. Yep. Those are my assumptions.
Right.
And
But
then lastly, we'd love to talk about if you can share any details. I don't know where you're at, if you're still in contracts, you might not be able to share too much, but just again, trying to look through your eyes and understand your business model and what excites you. You got a project in Cleveland. I believe you said was it a multifamily
it
project?
is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a value add project. And
Yeah.
I guess just generally speaking, what's the opportunity that you see? What's the high level of the business plan look like? And, I guess any foreseen challenges that might come with that particular project.
Well, so that project required a lot of upgrading, and so we're putting some money into it and upgrading it and bringing the vacancy down. That was a project that had a lot of vacancy because it had been a neglected property, but we felt like it had was in a promising area and a lot of demand for the product if we fix it up, and we're seeing that as we fix it up, we're getting the occupancy up. We're also doing some historic rehabs. So we find in some small towns around the Midwest, downtown buildings that are in need of attention, and historic tax credits are pretty
Hmm.
generous for projects like that. And there is tremendous demand for housing in some of these small towns. Some of them are even losing population, but they still have a housing shortage. A lot of dilapidated buildings, and you fix one up, and you can fill them up.
Fantastic. That's sounds like you got your hands in a number of different pots. So I like the diversification. For David, for those that want to learn more about you and your company and the different things you guys have going on, is there a website? Is there a good place to find you?
Boy, there's not much. We operate pretty under the radar, but you can find some information about me just by googling David Barker in Iowa. And some of the academic writing that I've been doing has been in a journal called Econ Journal Watch.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Well, David, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I really appreciate you joining us and wishing you all the best here as we go through some of these uncertain times that might be coming our way. But I appreciate you joining the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
Alrighty, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bob, wishing you huge success. Take care now.